Hey guys, I'm Wyatt Miller, the windsurfing and winging brand manager for Slingshot, and today we're going to do an unboxing of the Hover Glide F-Wind V3 foil system. It comes in this great bag so you can pack it all up. This is the windsurf foil. Open it up and it's got awesome fleece line compartments for everything. So you've got your Allen key here for putting in attaching the foil to the tunnel box. This is the fun part, you get to look at all the cool pieces. The big wing here comes with the Infinity 76 wing, and it's in this nice kind of guitar line case, and it's got a neoprene cover on it. So you got the Infinity 76, great all around wing. It's my favorite for most every application. It comes with the rear stabilizer. It's a smaller 42 rear stabilizer. Perfect for windsurfing. It's got its own neoprene case here too. Get rid of the case. You got your 42 rear stabilizer. Next up, you got your switch fuse, so you can mount it in A, B, or C positions to move the center of lift and move the front wing further forward or back. It's the long switch fuse. And it comes with the 90 centimeter mast. So nice long mast. We find that that's actually easier to use just because you have more time to correct your errors. It's easier than the shorter ones. Most people go straight to it. You are going to crash from higher up, but you've just got more time to correct your errors before touching down or overfoiling. And it's my favorite mast height for cruising, making it above swell, jumping and everything. So that's all the fun pieces. Next, we've got the tuttle adapter. Comes in its own little case there. And now we get to the super important part, which is the bolts. And you really have to pay attention to these bolts. And we're going to go through which ones to use where so you don't mess it up. The first thing when you open it up, you're going to find two separate baggies with big warnings on them. It's got this whole cardboard warning. You need to read the warning, understand the warning, because if you use the bolts wrong, you risk losing your whole foil to the bottom of the ocean, which is not fun. So nobody likes reading directions, but we put them in their own special bags with these huge warnings. You have to read it and you have to understand it, and we're going to help you do that in this video. So set those two aside. Next up, in this little wrapped up here, we've got the rear stabilizer shim. So that's going to go under your rear stabilizer so it lines up all straight. You definitely have to use this no matter what. What else have we got in here? We've got your Allen keys. That's everything you'll need to be able to assemble your foil. Next up, we've got the big unmarked bag of bolts. So these we're going to go through and show you what they are and where to put them. Then you find your lanolin oil and your Teflon tape. So lanolin oil and Teflon tape. And this is super important. I have all sorts of foilers who've been foiling on our gear for years and they're not using the Teflon tape. They don't understand what it's for. So I'm going to break it down for you real quick. You've got your lanolin oil, and that's what you're going to use to make sure you can get it apart at the end of the day. If you're in salt water or you're really bad at taking it apart frequently, you might want to use some marine anti-seize instead of this lanolin oil. But lanolin oil is nice and environmentally friendly, which Slingshot's all about, but I'm pretty bad at disassembling my foil, so I like to use a marine anti-seize, a little gnarlier stuff. So that's so that you can get it apart at the end of the day. The Teflon tape or plumber's tape, I like to use on basically all of the bolts, and especially all the bolts that connect to the mast. So if you're using the tuttle adapter or the pedestal adapter connecting to those masts, I always use the Teflon tape, and same with the fuse to the mast. What the Teflon tape does, I wrap it really thick 4 times around and always in the direction of the threads. So spin the screw to the right, righty-tighty, and wrap it, all those threads, in 4 layers of Teflon tape. What that does is when you're going through bubbles and there's all sorts of vibration happening in the foil, that stops the bolts from loosening up. So again, lanolin oil or your marine anti-seize helps you get it apart at the end of the day, but being careful to wrap those bolts in the direction of the thread with The plumber's tape is what soaks up the vibration in the foil and stops it from coming apart. The last piece we got here is the pedestal adapter. So this goes to your standard track, so you can slide it forward and back depending on what kind of box you have on your board. And last but not least, the quick start guide. So this has all the directions to tell you, ooh, cool picture of me, and you know, what bolts are what and how to put it together. But again, nobody likes reading directions, so I'm going to assemble it all for you right here and make sure it's nice and clear. Here we go. So it's really good before you assemble this, A, read the directions in the quick start guide, and B, lay out all your bolts, and I've labeled them here so it's really clear which is which. The first thing is you have the shortest little M6 by 25, and that's the front wing set screw. So that connects your front wing to the fuselage. And it's an M6 flathead, and it looks like these longer M6 by 30 screws that you use to connect your rear stabilizer to the fuse. And a lot of people just grab randomly in the bag and they try to use one of these longer ones in the front wing, and then it pushes up against the mast cap. It doesn't go together right. They get kind of frustrated. So there's only one of these smaller M6 by 25s, and that's your front wing set screw. And then you're going to use your M6 by 30s, the little bit longer ones, to connect your rear stabilizer to the fuselage. Next up, we got M8 by 40 flat heads, and these are used to connect the pedestal to the mast. So if you're using the pedestal instead of the tuttle, you're going to use these M8 by 40s to connect it to the mast. Next up, we have the M8 by 50s, and these we're going to use windsurfing. If you're using B or C fuse position, you're always going to use these longer ones to connect the fuse to the mast in B or C position. If you try to use these long ones in the pedestal, the mast isn't tapped far enough to accept the long ones. So you've got to make sure you use the M8 by 40s for the pedestal to mast, and the M8 by 50s to connect the fuse to the mast for B or C position. Then we've got these big M10 bolts. They're the only M10 bolts in the whole pack. They're used to connect your board to your tuttle adapter. So those ones, they're the only M10s. Don't have to worry too much about those. Then we've got your M8 by 45 barrel head bolts. These are going to be used to connect your fuse to your mast when you're in A position. A position we're not going to use in windsurfing. That's only for other sports where you're mounting the mast directly into the neck of the front wing, and you've got to be very sure that you use these longer M8 by 45s. Next up, we get the two sets of bolts that come in their own bags with the warning. The first thing is these M8 by 75. These are your tuttle adapter to your mast. So these are really long, longest bolts in the whole pack. You've got to use them to connect your tuttle adapter to your mast. That's why they come with a big warning. If you use these shorter ones, the M8 by 45s, they'll go in there, they'll thread a little bit, but not enough, and you risk losing your whole foil because the tuttle head will come disconnected. So you've got this big warning here. It says make sure to use these long M8 by 75s to connect the tuttle to the mast. Don't use the shorter ones. Lastly, the other big warning, and this is absolutely the most important, I'm going to talk about it later in the video too. These are your little M8 by 23s that are used to cover up the A position hole in the front wing. So if you're windsurfing, you're always going to use this. B or C position, you're going to use this to cover up the A position hole. What happens to people is that they've been windsurfing and they've been using this mast cap the whole time, then they want to go wakeboarding or something, and so they're going to mount the mast into the wing in A position right here. So they pull these out and they don't go far enough in. You have to make sure that if you're not going to use the mast cap, you've got to use the M8 by 45s so they actually stick far enough into there. You can see that there's no way these little M8 by 23s are going to stick very far in there. So that's a huge warning. Again, if you're using A position, you've got to use these longer M8x45s. These tiny ones are only to hold this little mast cap in. Now I'm going to show you how to prep your bolts. Again, you're going to want to use the lanolin oil to make sure you can get it apart at the end of the day. Nice environmentally friendly stuff. If you're in salt water all the time or you're bad at taking it apart, you might want to invest in some Permatex, some anti-seize lubricant. You can buy it at auto parts store or a hardware store, aluminum or marine anti-seize lubricant. And then you've got your plumber's tape, your Teflon tape. This is wrapped around after the lanolin oil and the lubricant to stop vibration and stop the bolts from loosening up. So just get my finger all gross here, get it nice on the bolt, cover it pretty well, and then I like to go, you always want to put it on in the direction of the thread, so righty-tighty, and I like to use a lot of this Teflon tape, like 3 whole wraps around the whole bolt, kind of going from the bottom to the top, and then I work my way back down again, always going in the direction of the threads. Nice 3 solid wraps. All I can see is white instead of the silver threads. Rip it off, there you go. I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of the bolts, and then I'm going to show you how to put the whole thing together. Alright, now we're going to do some assembly. Your foil comes with these 3 Allen keys. There's an M4, 5, and 6. If you're into foiling, I highly suggest going out and purchasing some nice T-handle ones. You just drop them less, they're easier to use, they're quicker to use, and you can get them tighter. Just a better product if you're going to be disassembling and assembling foils all the time. First thing I'm going to do is take my front wing. Since I'm not using A position, I'm going to put that mast cap in the front wing there. Then I've got the fuse, and it's got A with an arrow this way, B with an arrow this way. So if you're going to use A or B position, the arrows are on the bottom, and it's going to slide in. If you need to get the wing further forward, like you're using an old slalom board, or you're using the really big 99 or 84 wings, then the C arrow points the other way, and you're going to slide it in that way. So I'm going to go for B position here. So it says A and B with the arrows. Put that into the front wing. The A and B are on the bottom. Slide it forward. Line it up real nice so that you can see the set screw hole perfectly. And take this little M6 by 25. Again, it's shorter than the M6 by 30s. And that's your set screw. Pop it in there. For the sake of time, I'm not going to screw all these in perfectly because that would just take too long, but make sure that you do. So the M6 by 25 goes in there, and then I've got my little M8 by 23s to hold the mast cap in. Pop those babies in there and tighten down. Again, this is going to take forever on a video, so I'm not going to do it, but make sure you get them nice and tight. Next up is putting your rear stabilizer on top of your rear stabilizer shim. So the rear stabilizer shim, you can see how it's got a nice place to hold that front wing, or sorry, that rear stabilizer. So that goes on the end. Put your stabilizer there, and then I'm using my M6 by 30s to connect the rear stabilizer on top of the rear stabilizer shim, which is mounted on the top of the fuselage. There we go, and I'll tighten those bad boys down. See how fast I can do it with these nice T-handles without dropping it once. It's absolutely clutch there. And now I've just assembled my fuselage with the front wing and the back wing. Next, we're going to use the mast and attach one of the adapters. So if you're using a track, you're going to use the track adapter, put it right there on top, and you need to be sure that you use the shorter M8 by 40 flatheads not the longer M8x50s, to connect the fuse to the mast. So the shorter ones I'm going to use to connect the pedestal adapter, and if I try to use the longer ones, the threads in the mast don't go far enough in, so you'll bottom out. You'll kind of figure that out quickly. If I'm not going to use the pedestal, then I'm going to use the tuttle adapter. Tuttle adapter slides on, nice tight fit, just like we want it. And then I'm going to use, just like the big warning said, these super long M8x75s. Pop them in there. Screw them down with my M6. Again, this is going to take forever, so I'm not going to do it. Lastly, you're going to attach your fuse to your mast in the B position using the M8x50s. So tall I can barely see it. There we go, and if I get that all the way tightened down, checking all my bolts, I've got the full assembly done. You can really crank all of the M8 bolts down pretty hard. It's the little M6s that I don't worry about getting crazy tight. You know, it's just a smaller head. These little M6s here and the M6s that attach the rear stabilizer. You know, I don't crank those down crazy hard, but I definitely like to torque down all these thicker M8 bolts significantly. So, tighten all these bad boys down, and you've got an assembled Hover Glide foil. Now I've got an assembled F-wind in the B position. You'll notice I do have some bolts left over. I've got my M8x40s, which are used to connect the pedestal to the mast. Again, I have it set up with a tuttle. If I want to use the pedestal, I'm going to use those M8x40s. And then the other bolts I have left over are the M8x45 barrel head bolts that if I was going to remove this mast cap and mount this mast directly into the wing, I would take out those little M8x23s and I would use these so they go far enough through the fuselage to actually mount into the mast. You are going to have those 4 bolts left over. These big old M10s we talked about, those will be used to connect your board to your tuttle, since we're using the tuttle. Now let's talk about the difference between B and C position. It can be a little confusing at first. I didn't get it at first, but it's pretty simple. So right now we're in B position. I've got about 1 thumb's distance between the front edge of the mast and the front wing. If I need to get this whole front wing further forward in C position because I'm riding a board where the tuttle box is extra far back, or if I'm using the big wings like the 84 or the 99 wing where the lift is further back, so I need to get the whole fuselage and front wing further forward, then I'd use C position. In C position, I'm going to have about 3 thumb widths here instead of 1. So what you're going to need to do is first disconnect. What you're going to need to do basically is take this fuse, flip it 180 degrees around, put the front wing where the rear wing is, and vice versa. So here we go, I'm going to pull it off. So now I've disconnected my fuselage, and I've got to swap sides. So I'm going to take my rear stabilizer and rear stabilizer shim off, and I'm going to take my front wing off, and I'm going to switch the fuse around to the other side. Pull pull my fuse out, and instead of the A and B arrows pointing forward into the front wing, I'm going to flip it around so that the C arrow is pointing forward. Pop it back in there, and put all my bolts back in. Put in my rear stabilizer and rear stabilizer shim. And now you'll see that when I go to mount my mast, now there's about 3 thumbs distance forward. So I've just got that whole front wing 2 more thumbs distances further forward than it was in B position, which gets the lift further forward and can be used with the bigger wings, or if you have an old board where the tunnel box is further back, like an old slalom board or a non-foil specific board. And I'll put these bad boys in there, tighten everything